Hello, Internet. It's Daniel with Driving Dragons. Today, I am back to XP to level 3. And I'm going to quit picking on this dude here in a minute. I'm seriously going to search for a video that maybe I can find some common ground with him on, because that's generally what I try to do. But one more time, this one I just couldn't step away from. We have got the pudgy nerd boy with the dyed hair, trying to tell people how realistic D&D, how to make, realistic D&D combat, etc. And once again, making a display of just a complete lack of understanding of the concept of how D&D combat works. Now, let me preface this by saying it. D&D combat is not realistic and is not supposed to be realistic, especially modern D&D. Because modern D&D is a superhero fantasy, basically. It's a high fantasy, heroic fantasy. And heroic fantasy is not the same thing as just a fantasy setting. Heroic fantasy means that these characters are intended to be far above and beyond. And that is one of your major differences between AD&D back in the 70s, even to a small extent, 2nd edition AD&D, and WotC D&D. I'm a big fan of 3rd edition. 3rd edition is right there in the middle of that progression between the AD&D wargaming thing, where it was supposed to be, yeah, you're better because you're kind of the experienced soldier who's come up, but it's still, you're just exceptional and you work your way through, but it's still super deadly. And like when a human fights a dragon, that's a huge deal. When a human fights any kind of monster, that's a big deal because that monster is super lethal even to a really elite character. And the 5e, which is like every single character is like a member of the Avengers. They come with plot armor as a class feature in every class, and everything is about how to make them more fantastical, more powerful. It's a team of Supermans going to fight monsters that are beneath them. And for me, 3rd edition was kind of the happy medium there, where you were still heroic fantasy. I used to tell my players all the time that from a 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons perspective, a level 1 character is already an Olympic caliber athlete, or a PhD a PhD level intellect, or a high level inventor, or whatever the case may be for your character. If you're looking at a fighter is not just a man at arms who has some military training. A fighter is already like a high level professional combatant who's already a cut above everybody else. They even had the NPC classes like warrior, adept, expert, etc., where a first level fighter is going to mop the floor. Even up to almost a fifth level warrior is probably going to get his ass beat in a one-on-one fight with a first level fighter. So you're already, and of course the way the stats are rolled, you're already well above average. And then you think about it in the 5th edition context, it's even worse. I mean, you got people who are like, oh man, I got 2 12s and an 11. 10 is average. So you're complaining that 3 of your stats are above average instead of exceptionally far above average. So, that's a little bit of a off topic for this video, but it kind of plays into it. D&D combat's not realistic. I mean, people take, 4 axe hits to the chest and around and shrug it off like it's nothing. They get beat halfway down and they're still there. But there's ways to go around that. I did a whole video on HP and ways to make HP fit more, and to take a concept to make D&D combat narratively more realistic. But what's funny is this actually comes from the opposite end of the spectrum. It comes from such a gross misunderstanding of how combat works, that, and what combat is supposed to be described as, it's so game rule player's handbook focused, and it also just has such a wild misunderstanding of combat arts that it's kind of funny. So I'm bringing up this a perspective of being a former professional kickboxer who held titles on a regional level, who fought mixed martial arts, who trained in various martial arts, both European and Oriental, from, there's the bad word, Oriental, Asian, Japanese, whatever you want to say, because I did Japanese, Korean, and, Filipino and Chinese martial arts. But anyway, I've got a very long martial arts background from the time I was 7 years old. I've studied multiple weapons. I have studied fencing under a former Olympic coach. I have studied some HEMA. I have studied Kendo. I've fought professionally in a unarmed capacity as a kickboxer and as a mixed martial artist. So I'm not only going to put that perspective into this, but I'm also going to, and this will be the first time I've ever done this because video editing is not, something that's high on my skill list. I'm going to splice in some different pieces since this is weapon fighting. I'm going to pull up some historical European martial arts championships, some HEMA fencing from some of, people who are true elites with weapons like long sword and rapier and saber and whatnot, and show some of the things that I'm going to try and splice in here, just from just so that I can kind of show a modern take on what he's getting wrong here. So that's enough rambling intro. Let's move forward and see what old Jacob has to say about realistic D&D combat.
Okay, today we're out in the field. We've created 2 5-foot squares. We measured them. They're 5 foot. And we're going to be debunking some of the D&D combat myths. First of all, look how enormous this square is. Never think about the fact you could be in the 2 different corners. So, So this is how you normally be fighting, but you probably be like, whoa, 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 when your armor class is 100.
Okay, so clearly there's some tongue-in-cheek here. These are not in anything that remotely resembles a proper fighting stance. What's hilarious, and Shadiversity did a great video on this, even though I do call into question some of Shadiversity's experience with weapons and whatnot, but he is well studied, and he is right in this particular video. If anything, 5-foot squares is in some ways too close. It is especially too close in a one-on-one perspective. Now, in a melee, like a general melee, multiple opponents on both sides combat situation, it may be a little different, but first off, you're never going to stand like this. I mean, this is just ridiculous. I can fill a 5-foot square myself just with my own physical presence, and I'm not a large man. I'm of average size and build. But making yourself clearly, to make it not comfortable to be in a 5-foot by 5-foot area with me is not difficult, and it's certainly not at range.
Okay, so normally at level 1, you can only make 1 attack. So 6 seconds. Here's my turn. Why is it that fighters and other classes are the only ones who can do this?
Okay, so I'm going to make 2 points here on this, on the whole 6-second thing. First, I will definitely cut in some HEMA examples here, some high-level fencing examples, as well as some kickboxing and martial arts footage when it comes to number of attacks. Yes, sometimes you are, especially if you are not as skilled. Like if you're a skilled combatant, but not a super skilled combatant, it's going to take you some time to do that. There's actually kind of a fun paradox. There's this point where in training, and this comes from a unarmed and an armed perspective, where the reckless bum rush becomes a problem, where you know enough to start to think tactically and fight well, but you get overwhelmed by the crazy charging attack, and then once you pass that bell curve, once you pass that mark, you get to the point where you have like the master fencer who just carves somebody up if they want to try and do the I'm going to charge and wildly flail thing. Looking for openings and entrances is a super, super important part of fighting. You see this all the time in if you watch any kind of martial arts competition or boxing. Like if you watch a UFC fight, for instance, yeah, sometimes a guy blitz out of the corner and throw a flying knee or something. But as a general rule, you'll see him come out and circle and look for the opportunity. So that's one thing where this is incorrect. So here we go with two very respected historical martial arts fencers fighting with rapiers. And you'll notice the time down there, 5 seconds. And spoiler alert, these two very well-trained swordsmen, let's see how many attacks, or what you would consider an attack in D&D, are made in 6 seconds. So, 10 seconds. And notice how far apart this is. And there's a good 5 feet at least. They are not in quote-unquote adjacent squares, or if they are, they're at the very, very back of it. Couple of things. Bam, there you go. First real meaningful exchange with real, quote, attacks, 30 seconds in. 30 seconds in. And there was your attack. So, when you look at that kind of thing, kind of puts the whole lie to it, doesn't it? Okay, so we're going to take a look here real quick. This is Rico Verhoeven fighting Ben Sadek. Rico is the Glory World Heavyweight Champion, probably the greatest living kickboxer today. There's an argument for Bada Hari and a couple others, but for the most part, Rico Verhoeven is probably the greatest kickboxer alive today. And we're going to take a look at the attacks and exchanges, and in particular, the distance. I mean, these guys are unarmed combatants, and they are not, they're within separate 5-foot squares, but they're not right up in each other's face. And they are easily the distance that old Jacob was complaining about when he was standing there with his feet side by side, waving his foam sword in front of his face. Got to be a little careful here because of the some copyright issues. Just don't want to get busted for taking too much of this clip. But let's take a look. Okay, look at that. We're going several seconds in, some feints, a jab. Like I said, he has not fired an attack yet in Dungeons and Dragons terms. These are little feints. An attack. Attack is probably better known as an exchange. There you go. There's an attack from each of them. He fires a jab, is countered with a kick. He takes the low kick. So you've had a couple of attacks in about 10 seconds here from two, what would be, 6th and 10th level monks, when they do their flurry of blows and their multiple unarmed strikes. Right. The other thing is D&D combat and attack is not just a method of you swinging your sword or using your weapon or thrusting with your spear. Okay, that's not what it is. And if your DM is describing it that way, he's really missing some opportunities. What an attack is, it may be a combination or something where the goal is to land a particular attack. So from, say, a kickboxing perspective, my one attack, maybe I step in and throw a jab and a cross and then fire a right roundhouse kick to the head. The jab and the cross are not my damaging blows that are meant to really cause damage on this attack sequence. The jab and the cross are there to set up the head kick that's coming around, because I am trying to maneuver your defenses or maneuver your body positioning or set myself up into a place where I have a strong, clear path to throw this roundhouse kick to your head. So in D&D terms, I'd roll my attack, and a successful attack would be I step out, I throw the jab, I throw the cross, you've moved your hand out of position to block the backside of the cross, the head kick comes around, smashes into your temple. That's a successful attack. A critical hit, it slams in, you're moving into my kick, everything goes perfect. A miss might very well be that I step in, I throw the jab, I throw the cross, and when I throw the head kick, you see it coming, you step back. And we're not talking you step back 5 feet. You step back a foot, and that my foot goes whizzing in front of your face. So that D&D attack is not just, oh, I threw a punch. It's I stepped in, I did, we'll use a sword now. I use a feint, a partial thing, so I make you address it. I circle around, I come back over the top, and now my thrust is coming in. That is a single attack. I think a better way to say it would be you get one attack sequence as a first level fighter. One more here, another one I got to be quick with because of the copyright potential. But this is Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in one of his best knockouts back at UFC 143. And I want you to take a quick look at this and see how this is a single attack. This is not 3 attacks in a D&D context. This is a single attack.
Up to the higher level of talent. In the just like that. How good was that? Well, he will work his way up to the higher level of talent.
Let's watch it. Yep, right over the shoulder, Mike, so he didn't see it coming. Dan Stitchen had no idea that kick was on the way because the way that Stephen Thompson placed it, it was blind to him until it came over the shoulder and then landed on the face. Really.
So there you go. 1, 2, 3. And once again, that whole sequence with setup, movement, footwork, the whole shebang would have been within a 6-second time period there.
Watch this. I'm a level 20 fighter.
That's about right. That's 8 attacks. So that's about 6 seconds. Because it probably looks more likely.
This is the spin move. Why do I need to spend 6 seconds to go like this? Oh shit. Okay. All right. Fair point. I'm gonna master the art of being a rogue. I can disengage as a bonus action.
Again, a total misunderstanding of how the disengaging thing works and the spin move. First off, you're not going to turn your back on your opponent. Spin moves require setup. Spin moves require specific circumstances and specific positioning, which is part of the reason why you wouldn't do them unless you really know what you're doing. But yes, disengaging, when you move back, when you retreat, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen without that person moving. And you're trying to withdraw, and especially if you're trying to withdraw fully and try and get your full move, you're trying to get out quickly enough that you can use the rest of your 30-foot move. In 3rd edition, you had the 5-foot adjust, and of course you have the disengage action, which is where you take your time to make sure that you're in good position to get out of range to where this person can't quickly close with a lunge or something of that nature. Stepping back to his first little skit about the range in the 5-foot square, if you give me a French rapier, I will tag your ass from 10 or 12 feet away with a good lunge. You give me a cross step, and I can probably skewer you from 15 to 16 feet away with just a cross step. And that's a very basic maneuver. I'm going to present and I'm going to lunge, and I'm, little over 5'9". My lunge is going to easily cover your attempt to run away. So yeah, if you're not disengaging carefully, I'm going to tag you. Even in a hand-to-hand combat situation, you see this happen a lot in kickboxing and in MMA. I usually say, brain went to sleep. But you'll see a guy who thinks he's not really in position or range or stuff, who kind of lets his guard down as he steps out of range because he's tired or something and gets knocked out massively, just gets flatlined because he steps over and bam, it's right into that move from the other guy. Plus, I can move. Remember that in D&D combat, the 6 seconds is supposed to be 6 seconds. And if we're all moving at the same time, it's not you get your full 6 seconds, then I take my 6 seconds. These things are happening roughly simultaneously. You have initiative, so you're slightly ahead of me. I'm behind you, so I can react to what you do because you're moving slightly ahead of me. But I can move forward faster than Usain Bolt is not going to move backwards faster than I move forward. Okay, especially when I've got a weapon and stuff and I can lunge out. My lunge is going to move a lot faster than Usain Bolt trying to move backwards. So yeah, if you're not using the disengage action where you're using that combat expertise to step out of the way, and that's the whole thing with the rogue being able to disengage and use his full movement stuff is because the rogue class is not just based on dexterity and agility. It's not just based on thieving skills and stuff. It's really based on situational awareness. And your rogue that is represented, the rogue gets that free disengage because he is super aware of his surroundings and is thus super aware of the threat range and the posture of whoever he's disengaging.
So another one people don't understand is why you have disadvantage when you're right here. That's a valid point. What? I have normal attack here. Oh, it's because you can hit the weapon?
You know, it's not just because you can hit the weapon. This one was one of those things that's also hilarious. It's funny that he's just immediately disproved. Oh, people don't understand. Well, why do I have this? Oh, I guess that makes sense. What's funny is this makes sense once again much further out. Masad Ayub, who is he is a world-renowned firearms and self-defense instructor with more talent than more knowledge base than just about anybody when it comes to real-world armed scenarios and stuff. And he's pretty famous for putting forth a classic demonstration that is really actually as old as time, where within 20 feet, a person with a knife is more dangerous than the person with a gun. And a person with a gun with a handgun, has trouble with somebody with a dedicated attacker within 20 feet. Because the average human reaction time to get that firearm out on target and fired is less time, or is more time than it takes the average dedicated attacker to close that 20-foot distance and make contact with that bladed weapon. So yes, you have numerous instances of police officers who are stabbed multiple times trying to get their firearm out to make a shot at point blank range. You have disadvantage because you're in combat and you're dealing with somebody who's like trying to swing an axe at you while you're trying to fumble to get your crossbow up and online to make that that shot that's in line. And even at the distance they're at right now, which is probably about 10, 11 feet where they're at right now, the big guy with the sword, if he went to swing right now, like just a step forward and swing, even with Jacob having that gun up and semi-pointed at him, he's going to hit Jacob before Jacob can bring that firearm into line and pull the trigger. So, yeah, disadvantage. As a matter of fact, you don't need just disadvantage. You should get disadvantage, and there should be an attack of opportunity against you for attempting to use that. Okay, so here we have an old school police training video about knives versus guns and why you have, quote, disadvantage when they're within 5 feet. Let's take a look at this real quick.
With a reactionary gap of about 1 foot or less, it's impossible for you to react quickly enough to even touch your holstered sidearm once the attack begins. At about 5 feet, the average officer can't even get his sidearm unholstered. Unless your sidearm or baton is already out, you'll have to rely on physical control at 5 feet or less. At about 10 feet, you might get your sidearm out, but you probably won't get a shot off. A suspect with a knife can close 7 paces and deliver deadly force in less than 1 1/2 seconds. For the average officer to deliver 2 rounds against an attacker who starts moving at 10 feet, the sidearm must already be drawn and ready to shoot.
There you go. That ranged weapon in combat.
Push it out of your hand.
That makes so much sense. But if I'm here, now I have disadvantage. No! Ooh, okay, yes, this is very hard to aim.
I always assumed expert was like, you were just really good at going like,
You're prone. I have a normal attack doing this, but I have disadvantage if I'm right here. This is just as easy.
spoken like somebody who doesn't shoot firearms. And especially not things like crossbows and bows and things of that nature. While yes, being 10 feet away, so being back and, having the square between you is not necessarily completely realistic because you still have kind of an angle there. But the fact of the matter is you're shooting at an angle. You're shooting in a combat situation where there's other chaos and distraction going on around you. The guy is generally not just laying there prone. He's usually mobile, which makes him harder to hit. And prone makes you more difficult to hit. He presents a lower profile as a target than he does right on top of him. Right on top, I'm shooting straight down into your back, the widest part of your profile. Back there, I'm having to shoot at an angle. And where's your disadvantage come into? Because remember, that miss doesn't necessarily mean that I missed. It could mean that I skipped off your armor or something. So say he's laying here. He's got a breastplate on. There's a shield on one arm. Yeah, you may, quote, hit him, but it skips off of that shield or bounces off of that helmet, or it doesn't hit flush into that breastplate, so it slides off. So yeah, a disadvantage on that attack makes a lot of sense if you have any kind of critical thinking of a combat scenario there.
You missed.
Shut up. Okay, now you're going to be a monk.
Oh, God.
All right, ready? You gotta catch it. Dang, monks are fast. No. Oh, God. This is supposed to be difficult.
This is a problem.
This one is one of the funniest things on the planet. You want to talk about fighting with two weapons? Yes, it is a lot more difficult because you have to be conscious of where those weapons are moving, how they're going to interact with each other. I can tie you up using your own weapon against you. Typically, you did not see a lot of historic examples of people fighting with two equal-sized weapons either, or even two similarly sized weapons. Generally, it's going to be a dagger or a poignard or some sort of parrying implement in the offhand, while the primary hand is using a rapier or a short side sword or a back sword or something of that nature. Very rarely was two weapons used for a lot of reasons. It sacrifices the ability to use a shield, which historically is a massive, massive advantage. It's way more important than your sword. It requires a tremendous amount of dexterity. It requires specialized training for the two weapons to work in concert with each other and not actually become an impediment to each other. And of course, part of it's skit trying to be funny, but he tries to go like the Ginsu knife guy off of the infomercial and just da-da-da-da-da-da. It's like, this is not correct. This is not how it works. And once again, you've got a situation where he is so laughably naive about how combat works that he shouldn't be debunking anything except for debunking the myth that he should be talking about realistic combat.
Oh, God. Okay, wait. What about dodging, though?
Like
all right, so I have to move in. You're already swinging.
Oh.
We both move at the same time.
This isn't how D&D works. We can't move at the same time.
I'm taking the dodge action. I've been overwhelmed.
Wait, you need your sword. Hey.
Hi, you've been shoved.
Do it with you like that.
No, you go like this. That's how you shove. You shove like that. No, you shove like that.
Now they're just playing grab ass.
This video was sponsored by the new Kickstarter, Grim Hollow.
Yeah, we don't care about the Kickstarter here. And I don't think there's anything after that. Nope, there's nothing after that. So yeah, like I said, I'm going to cut in some actual footage of real professional fighters here. Just so, it's almost like he never... Actually, that kind of makes a lot of sense. I was going to say it's like he never got beat up as a kid or he never had a fight on a playground as a kid. And that makes a lot of things just kind of come into focus and make sense with old Jacob. Is that he never toted an ass whooping as a kid. Because, some of this stuff is things that are debunked that are not accurate just from you had a playground fight that you can actually remember. just a lot of these things. Go look at Shadiversity. A lot of the things that I really laugh at here is the range and the attack timing. I almost wish he had gotten into things like the attacks of opportunity and stuff with grappling, with some of the grappling rules and stuff, which, D&D's grappling system is absolutely horrendous for anybody who knows what they're doing. But in some ways, there's a lot of things that don't make sense as a realistic thing when it comes to combat in a Dungeons and Dragons system. It is not meant to be realistic, but I do find it very amusing. And it's actually quite impressive that he actually managed to go into this to debunk the combat myths, and yet somehow he managed to only literally he was wrong about everything. The only thing he debunked was stuff that actually does make sense if you have any idea how it works. So anyway, that's what I've got for this one. I promise, guys, I'm really going to go to these channels that I dislike, like XP to Level 3 and Jenny D and these others, and I'm going to find stuff where we can find common ground. I think it's important to understand that even people who have very, very little to offer still have things to offer, so that they should not be just dismissed entirely out of hand. But I promise this is the last time I'm going to make a video just to make fun of poor old Jacob. So anyway, like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you think below. Maybe he can make a video making fun of my bad editing, because I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a bloodbath. But anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Like, share, subscribe, and next one, I promise, is going to be more about game information and less about making fun of people with foam swords.